We have heard from the Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, earlier in the programme, saying that despite this law passed by Parliament saying that Boris Johnson must extend if he can't get a deal, he will not extend. What do you make of the government's position?
I think it's extraordinary. And the Foreign Secretary has a legal background himself. The idea that a sitting Prime Minister in one of the oldest democracies on the planet would say, I will ignore the law. And he was saying, oh, no, it's not ignoring the law, it's just testing it a little bit. Is that what we say to our kids? Is that what we say to poor, working people, vulnerable people in this country? Oh, it's not breaking the law, it's just testing a bit. I think the position is irresponsible and elitist. The idea there's one law for Boris Johnson and his mates and another law for everyone else, it's appalling. I
mean, what they would say is that they are trying to enact the will of the people, that they're trying to do what Parliament is trying to block, which is to carry out the result of the referendum.
And I know what they say, but every tin pot dictator on the planet throughout history has used the excuse of having the people on their side to break the law, to shut down Parliament and all the rest of it. It's absolutely extraordinary, and I think it's very un-British, as was the purge of the 21 MPs who are Conservatives. You know, they're not secret Corbynistas. I noticed the way that Dominic Raab mentioned Jeremy Corbyn's name about 100 times in his interview, as if Jeremy Corbyn is the scary one. I think a lot of people will look at the behaviour of these of this number 10 in recent weeks and decide that the person who's being un-British and anti-democratic is Boris Johnson.
I mean, Dominic Raab also said in the interview that the government would not break the law. He said they just want to test the position.
Well, the legislation is crystal clear. If you don't have a deal in the next few weeks, you have to apply for the extension. It's a duty that's laid in the legislation on the Prime Minister personally. The law is crystal clear. I thought he was thoroughly unconvincing and mealy-mouthed on that. There's a legal opinion published in the Observer today from a number of QCs making it crystal clear that if you don't abide by that legislation, people start going to court, and then if you ignore court orders, you're in contempt of court. We don't want to be in that place.
Well, what does that mean, if you are in contempt of court?
If you're in contempt of court, then you're breaching a court order, just like anybody who ever breached an ASBO or anything else, and you are facing, you know, sanctions that we do not want for any minister, let alone a Prime Minister.
Are you talking about prison?
You know, this is the sort of stuff that what I think is going on here is that Johnson and co. Deliberately using breaking the law as a kind of dog whistle because they think it makes them look tough, but I just think it makes them look appalling, which is why I want this to be sorted out in Parliament, which is why shutting down Parliament and seeking to dissolve Parliament tomorrow so that you can crash out is terrible. So we need to yes, we're going to have a general election. It's going to be sooner rather than later. It'll be weeks, not months, but we will not allow them to use their sort of chaos theory and crash out without Parliament being able to have its say.
The thing is, they are saying that they don't want to be in this position and they are willing to go to the public to find out what the public think, to have more democracy and call an election. And it's the Labour Party that is blocking that.
So we will have an election, and today we've launched our voter registration campaign, and it's really important that all your viewers, whatever their views on Brexit or on whether they prefer Boris Johnson or Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister, everyone should be registering to vote so they can have their say. It's going to be sooner rather than later, but we cannot crash out by default within a general election period, and we cannot allow Boris Johnson and his colleagues to manipulate the date of the general election so that we crash out.
That's what they would say you're doing, that you're trying to manipulate the date of the general election so that it's after that deadline. I can just have a quick look at something that John McDonnell said on the show last weekend. He just said, let me just say a message to Boris Johnson via you. General election, bring it on.
Absolutely.
What happened to bring it on?
Well, I still say bring it on. It's just we won't allow you to crash Britain out contrary to the will of Parliament and without putting that option to the people before they've had that opportunity. I'm talking weeks, not months. We're launching our voter registration campaign today. It's going to be very soon, but I won't stand by where you've got a Prime Minister who shuts down Parliament, who purges his once broad church party and tries to crash us out before there's been a general election, that would be wholly undemocratic.
So you're talking about weeks, not months. I'm just keen to try and pin down what you mean by that. Do you mean there will be a general election in weeks, not months, or do you mean that you'll give the green light in weeks, not months?
Well, I think quite possibly, but I mean, forgive me, but things are moving very fast. And the other thing I would say is that yes, Jeremy Corbyn is the leader of the opposition, but there are people in other opposition parties and people like the Conservative rebels who all share this approach that it would be thoroughly irresponsible to behave like, I don't know, the Joker in The Dark Knight or something like that, and just go for chaos theory. And I'm just really worried that there are some people in Number 10 at the moment who literally believe in causing chaos and fear and polarisation on the streets in order to get their way and deliver a no-deal Brexit that Parliament didn't vote for, the people didn't vote for, so that they can do their cosy deals with their mates in Trump's White House.
I understand your frustration about what's happening in Number 10. Like, that's coming through very clearly. But I just really want to pin you down on the timings here, because this is important. Are you saying that you are happy to have an election as long as it's past that mid-October deadline, the council? Are you saying you're happy to have an election as long as it's after the 31st of October deadline? What do you want?
So obviously, I don't speak for all the opposition leaders. I'm just the legal advisor to the shadow government. But what I have been instructed at this point to say, and what I believe is the priority, is that we have to guarantee that we don't crash out in an election period, and we have to guarantee that this incumbent in Number 10 is not able to use his willingness to disobey the law and to manipulate a general election date so that the crash out happens before we've had the opportunity for that election. Those are the priorities, and so it's going to take perhaps a few weeks to lock that down. But as soon as we've locked down those things that I've just said to you, we want that election.
So before Christmas?
Oh, goodness. I mean, goodness me, I certainly hope so.
OK. Now, you're talking there about you're worried about what Number 10 are doing, but there will be some people who will look at the Labour Party's position and think you just don't like democracy because you don't want an election right now, even though it's what you've been calling for years. They'll be saying that you are not accepting the result of the referendum because you effectively think that people got it wrong, so you want people to have another go until they give you the right answer. Why do you not trust the public?
No, I do trust the public, and that's why I want a general election.
Just not yet.
I'm talking.
Because you don't want people to have the opportunity to vote for a no deal.
No, sure.
Because this wouldn't be an issue if you won the election,
just to be clear, if we have an election, it is perfectly reasonable for Boris Johnson and his chums to say, vote for us and we'll give you no deal. Okay?
So that's what he would be saying with an election now? And
No, but what I'm worried about is crashing out without the people having had their say in an election. Do you see my point? Because it's dirty tricks. It's undemocratic, dirty tricks where you say we ignore Parliament and we may manipulate, we ignore the law, we ignore Parliament, and we will keep the power to set the election date, manipulate the election date so that we crash out before that election may have happened. And we are talking about ruthless people who will sit here and smile at you and say, we'll test the law. But that means ignore the law. We're talking about people who will purge their party of people I disagree with, like Ken Clarke and Justine Greening and Nicholas Soames and all the rest. I've agreed with them on some basic rule of law, civil liberties issues. But of course I disagree with them about austerity and how to tackle poverty. But now we are dealing with people who are anti-democratic, anti-rule of law. I want a general election as soon as possible, but I cannot allow these people to shut down Parliament and ignore the law in the meantime.
At the same time, though, it's not just the Conservative Party who are effectively having issues keeping their party together, is it? There are people on Labour side as well who are wrestling with these issues too. One person, for example, John Mann, a Labour MP who wants to step down and become an anti-Semitism advisor. And he gave a quote to the Sunday Times today where he said, "Corbyn has given the green light to the anti-Semites and having done so has sat there and done nothing to turn that round. He has not just hijacked my political party, he's hijacked its soul and its ethics, and I will never forgive him for that." So there are people on your side too who feel their party has been hijacked.
Well, obviously I disagree with John Mann. He's one of 2 MPs that voted against the legislation to prevent a crash out. He's obviously very unhappy on those Labour benches at the moment, and so he has made his decision, and I personally wish him well in his future work.
Are you alarmed by the news that the first Labour MP to be fighting a re-selection ahead of the next election is Diana Johnson, last year backbencher of the year, someone who's done some campaigning work on the blood contamination scandal?
Sure. So what I would say about, because you'll appreciate I'm not an MP and I've not had to go through these hoops that these people have to do as members of Parliament representing their people. What I would say is, having looked into it and being advised about the process, having a trigger back. Having this trigger system does not mean that she's been deselected. It's very common, I'm told.
But it means she has to go through the reselection process ahead of an election.
And there'll be a short list. It'll be an all-women short list, because, and no doubt she'll be on it. It's not. I don't believe that this is a targeted, or from what I've heard, and I've looked into it for the reasons you suggest, this is not some plot or some factional polarisation issue. That there may be some other people like this, but it's not organised, it's not targeted, it's not polarised, and it's perfectly possible that she will sail through it and be the candidate. And if at some point, if when we get to the election, there's a need to stop that, suspend that local democracy. We are a democratic party, so it's quite important that MPs are answerable to their local party. But if at some point we get too close to the election, then it will be the national executive of the party that keeps or suspends that process.